going on, YouTube family? Michael Renee here, and today we are going to talk about why so many prophets don't like pastors. And I'm also going to share with you guys just a little bit of my healing journey. And so if you would like to hear, continue watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So since we finished that first part, let's get into the conversation today, you guys. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really good conversation per usual. And her and I were talking about something that most prophets either don't talk about or they do talk about it and they kind of feel bad for having the feeling that they have, but we'll get into it. So she's a prophet, of course. But not only is she a prophet, I also noticed I did not color correct. Hold that thought, because I just feel like I have to color correct with this particular look, y'all. So her and I were talking, and she was like, one of the things I know about my friend is that she's not only a prophet, but she definitely has the call of the apostle that's on her. And her and I were talking, she was like, okay, outside of the call of the apostle, she said, what else do you see on me? And I heard a particular call. I heard it. But I purposely didn't say that. And not because I'm a hater. But that does mean that I still had a little bit more healing that I need to walk through. So most apostles don't just have the call of the apostle on them. 9 times out of 10, either they're a prophet or they have a very strong prophetic gift. Evangelist, teacher, that's the call of the apostle. So I named everything but this one particular thing. And she was like, yeah, all of those are right. She said, dang, girl, you said everything in the book. I said, yeah. She said, what about a pastor? I said, I heard pastor. I just didn't say it. And reason being is because there's still some healing that I had to walk through. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm well aware. Most prophets don't just have the call of the prophet. Now, you do have some prophets that's literally legit just the prophet's prophet. Wherever you are, can you come get me? You know what I'm saying? And so, but most of them have the call of the apostle, or it's very rare that you would find a prophet that doesn't have the characteristics of the apostles, because apostles build, and because prophets love order. Most apostles operate from a place of order. They build. You can't build without having order. But there's one more call that most prophets don't like the answer to call to, or they actually just don't like and have big disdain for it. And that's the call of the pastor. Most prophets don't like pastors. Most prophets low-key hate pastors. Most prophets would rather be a prophet's prophet than a pastor. I'm going to explain why. Because I was there at that point. I remember saying to myself, and this is, please don't judge me. We listen and we don't judge. Just hear me out. I used to say to myself quite often that I hated pastors. I hated the call of the pastor. And I'm going to explain why. I was hurt. I was angry. And to be completely honest, like from what I saw with the pain that I had to walk through, with the stuff that I had to walk through, I was just like saying to myself, like, I could never be a pastor. Like, I could never be that. And you may say to yourself, well, Michael, that was one person. Yeah, it might have been that one person, but I also saw other pastors that were connected to this pastor that was just as dirty and did a lot of dirt. So I saw what I saw, and I was just like, there's just no way. And one thing I learned about most pastors have each other's back. And so because they understand what they've had to walk through and the stuff that they've had to deal with, they have each other's back. And so you can have one pastor that is abusing the church and another pastor won't come back to correct them. Because it's like, well, we've all had to walk through some things. Instead of hearing everybody else's story and everybody else's side. Again, I'm not saying that pastors don't walk through, because I know pastors walk through a lot of stuff. But I'm speaking from a place of a prophet. So if you are a pastor, please go tell your own story. God bless. But I'm speaking from the role of a prophet. So with that being said, from what I've seen, a lot of pastors have abused prophets, and it just is what it is. And so that caused a lot of prophets to feel some type of way towards the call of the pastor. But here's the thing about it. If God has called you to not only be a prophet, but also an apostle, there is no possible way that you can answer the call of the apostle and completely ignore the call of the, because most apostles are pastors. You have to deal with sheep. You have to shepherd sheep. And the reality of it is, there's just no way that you call yourself an apostle and completely skip over the pastor.
The pastor.
Here's the thing. Most prophets don't know how to deal with people. We're nice to an extent. We can prophesy. We can do all of those things. But most prophets don't know how to deal with people. Remember how I was saying in the last video, one of the things that I made mention is that prophets aren't mercy people. Like, I think that's something that we have to learn over time. And even then, because of the call that is on our life, it's actually very hard for us to give mercy or see mercy first. You know what I'm saying? This is why you need all of the fivefold ministry to tell us, okay, calm down. Like, I know everybody going to hell. I hear what you're saying, but we got to do something different, because this is not one of those situations. This is to correct, teach, and then let's try to bring them back to Christ, or try to get them to do better. But if you don't understand the role of the pastor, or at least getting to learn the role of the pastor, or at least healing from the things that pastor has done to you, and you're trying to skip over to be an apostle, let me tell you something. Number one, you won't have a church. And the reason why I say is because everybody is going to end up going to hell, just like how most prophets feel. And you're not going to have a church. Your church is going to be completely empty. But also, again, you still have to learn how to deal with people. Most prophets don't know how to deal with people. It just is what it is. It's something that we have to learn. Most of the reason why most prophets don't know how to deal with people is because growing up, we were set apart, and God literally set us apart. So, or if you have anything like me, my parents kept me in the house because of some trauma incidents that happened, family trauma. So we couldn't go anywhere, but that really didn't help because I'm already a prophet. Most prophets don't do well around people. So I didn't learn people skills until I got grown. I didn't learn about relationships and friendships and stuff, or understanding the importance of it, until I got grown. So that's why most prophets don't know how to deal with people, is because it's a part of our nature. We're loners, you know what I'm saying? But as you try to become somebody's apostle, you're going to have to learn how to deal with people. And because a lot of us had to walk through some of the stuff that we've had to walk through under pastors, it caused us to not like pastors. But you can't skip over that. There's just no possible way you can skip over that. Because I'm going to be honest with y'all, and y'all may not like what I have to say. All pastors are not bad. You just got sat under one that was not the best. But usually 9 times out of 10, again, character building. And there's another thing that I'm going to speak about in a second. Let's get into 3 reasons why. These are 3 of the main reasons why most prophets don't like pastors. Number 1, most prophets don't like pastors because a lot of pastors let a lot of stuff slide in their church. Here's the thing. It's not just so much of the fact that pastors let things slide in their church. It's what they let slide in their church. And usually 9 times out of 10, the very thing that they let slide in their church is the very thing that God is speaking about, and he's not happy about. So what does that do for the prophet? So when God gives us the go to go speak against it and say something, what happens is, in most cases, instead of the pastor coming with the prophet together, okay, like, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to deal with this? Let's pray about it. That spirit that's already operating in that church, that 9 times out of 10 has a legal right because it has not been dealt with, rises up in that church. And who is he going to come against? He's not going to come. That spirit is not going to come against the pastor. It's going to come against the prophet, because now you're speaking about something that I have legal right over, and I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not trying to move on. And so now that puts the prophet in a vulnerable and open position for attacks, because instead of the pastor yielding and coming together with the prophet and coming together with the intercessory prayer team so they can start praying some things through, and asking God to begin to open up our eyes and begins to see, the pastor gets upset and doesn't want anything to be said, or they feel as if like, well, you're trying to tell me what to do. No, I'm not telling you what to do. This is what the Lord is saying. And so that causes issues, that causes a divide within the church, because now the pastor doesn't want to listen to the prophet, and the prophet is sitting up there like, in most cases, like, I'm just doing what God told me to do. And now guess who's vulnerable to the hits? Guess who's vulnerable to the attacks? The prophet. Especially because in that moment, the pastor should have listened. And so that way the prophet stays covered. The prophet still can do what God has called them to do. Y'all both can come together, because there are things that pastors do that prophets don't. And there's things that prophets do that pastors don't. But let me explain to you how frustrating that is. Because of course, as I said in my last video, you can't force a pastor or anybody else to listen to you. We know that, right? We've heard that. And it takes time. Like it takes a minute for you to get an understanding of that. Like God has to deal with you about that because that's kind of a pride thing or whatever. And God has to reveal that to you. So my thing is this, and I had to learn that very early on. Like, Michael, you can't force pastors or leaders to be obedient to God and listen to you. Learn that very early on. Here's where the problem lies, because the enemy is not going to let you give up that quick. So if you're under a very immature leader, again, Satan is not going to let you give up that quick, because the reality of it is, if you choose not to listen, that's not on me. No. That's usually not the end all be all. So now you have that pastor that's getting on the pulpit stage and he's making sermons about you. Or you have that leader or that pastor that's coming against you and dragging your name in the mud. And you're trying to figure out, like, why is all of this stuff happening? Or they end up giving you the silent treatment and all you were doing is just being obedient. So if you have a prophet that's mature and they're like, well, if you choose not to listen, it has nothing to do with me. I'm just going to get back on the wall. And you have a pastor that's immature like that, because like I said, if they chose not to listen, you have to let God deal with them. But again, Satan's not going to let that go that easily. Usually 9 times out of 10, he's going to make it harder for you. And it's tough because the Lord has told me multiple times, he's like, Michael, they're not being disobedient to you. They're being disobedient to me. Right. But my name is being dragged in the mud and I'm being preached about. Like, why does this have to be that way? Right. And again, 9 times out of 10, God is allowing this to happen because he's trying to see your character. And also, there's one other thing that most prophets have to go through. The reason why you're at the church that you don't want to be at, and you've been begging God to release you, and you've been trying to figure out, like, God, why haven't you released me yet? Like, why am I still here? Is because God is trying to get you to learn honor. That has to be one of the hardest things in the world, to be at a church. God purposely places you under a negligent leader, under a leader that does not deserve honor, but God places you under that leader so that you can learn how to honor them, honoring those that do not deserve honor. That's hard. I remember having a dream, and I'm telling my business a little bit because I feel like telling my story. I remember a couple of years ago. Now I'll be the first one to say I did not feel like my pastor deserved honor. I didn't think that at all. I didn't think that at all. And everybody knew, the ones that, like, for the people that knew me, knew I didn't care for that man. And I did not think that he deserved to be honored at all. Didn't think it at all. And I remember having a dream. So this is where this gets tricky. So I ended up having this dream. And in the dream, long story short, the pastor apologized to me and I just wasn't having it. That means I still had a lot of unforgiveness in my heart. And so I woke up from the dream and the Holy Spirit. So I said to the Holy Spirit, he said, do you know what this dream means? Because I heard the word honor come to mind. And I said, I know, I didn't honor him. And I know, Lord, you're going to have to help me with that. He says to me, the Lord said, you didn't honor each other. Prophets, honor goes both ways. Now, you can't force that pastor to honor you. You can't. But honor goes both ways. And I was shocked that that was even the Lord's response to me. I was very shocked, to say the least. I was like, wait, what? He was like, you both didn't honor each other. He said it wasn't just you. And see, here's the thing. It would be a different conversation if I was just a regular church member. I'm not trying to make this sound bad, but it would be different. But I am a prophet. And he knew that I was a prophet. And the Lord was like, you both didn't honor each other. But honor was being screamed at from the pulpit, but it was by way of manipulation. But I always felt like honor needed to go both ways. And even if you're not a prophet, be very clear. Yes, honor your leaders. Honor your leaders. Pray for your leaders because they are the ones that watch over your soul. Like, we got that. But honor still goes both ways. Because how do you expect people to respect you if you don't honor them as well? Again, prophets, congregants, whoever you are, honor your leaders. But please hear me when I say prophets, honor goes both ways. Honor can't go just one way. Honor has to go both ways. Honor your leaders because they watch over and they're praying over your souls. But please hear me when I say honor does go both ways. And I used to always wonder that. I used to be like, God, I feel like honor needs to go both ways in my particular, situation. And the Lord confirmed it. He said, you both didn't honor each other. But the Bible still says, touch not my anointed. They are the people that God has placed over you. You have to learn how to honor them. We can get into the conversation of David and Saul. And that is something I've had to learn. And it's one of the hardest, but it's necessary, because when God puts you in that position to pastor or to be over somebody else's, to be somebody over somebody's sheep, or to pastor somebody's church or whatever, you want the same honor given and the same honor due. Honor your leaders. I know it's hard, and I know you feel like that particular leader does not deserve to be honored, but that's not up to you. You have to let God deal with you with that. Number 2, most prophets feel misplaced. And anytime prophets feel misplaced, it's a level of rejection that comes there. And it also comes to show that in most cases, pastors kind of they end up getting dropped. Most prophets end up getting dropped because they already don't know. They all usually don't know where to go, because pastors have not taken the time to do their study on the prophet. Okay, you preached about Elijah at your church. Okay, you preached about Obadiah. Okay, you preached about Micah. That's great. But we're not during that time. We're in a completely different time. And if God has sent this prophet to sit under you, then place them. Like in most cases, and I'm going to explain to you what this looks like. I don't know about you all, but I'm only 35. And so when it came down to prophets and stuff like that, especially living in the South, it was not talked about. Most prophets, you didn't hear about prophets. You didn't hear about any of that. And I always knew that prophets just came to give the word of the Lord. I didn't quite always understand what the role of a prophet was, what it is that they did. And in most cases, most churches are coming from Baptist, primitive Baptist, Pentecostal, apostolic. They're coming from churches that really didn't operate in the prophetic or utilize prophets. It's not that the pastors didn't know about them, but they didn't utilize them. And so congratulations. That's great that you're coming out of the legalistic and religious laws and rules of your church. But now they've gotten a little taste of the prophetic. They've gotten a little bit of a taste of prophets. And now God is sending prophets to their church. You guys have transitioned over to be in a prophetic house, but you haven't done your research to learn about prophets or even sat with the Holy Spirit about where to place prophets or what to do with prophets. You're utilizing the gifts of your prophets, but they still end up being uncovered because you don't know where to place them. In my opinion, if you weren't ready to transition all the way into an apostolic house like that, where you have prophets and apostles and all of that and evangelists and you got prophecy going on, I just don't think it would be wise for pastors to go ahead and transition over there. Because here's the thing, it's not just the fact that God is going to send prophets. Most pastors already have prophets in their church, and most of them already know that they have the prophets that are in their church. They already know about their spiritual gifts. They already know that they prophesy. They already know all of those things, but it leaves prophets uncovered when you don't do your research. I never forget this. I remember in 2019, 2019 was the start of all of the pain that I had to walk through. Like, it was the start of that. And I remember I had just walked through something horrible. I'm going to tell my story one day. I was trying to tell it a couple of weeks ago, but my phone kept acting up. Okay. And so I remember I used to have a salon, for the ones that don't know, but I used to have a salon. And I remember this woman came and booked an appointment. And I don't know how we got on the conversation, but she asked me what church I went to. And I told her the church, and my church was very well known, to say the least. We'll just keep it at that. And I remember her, she ended up prophesying over me. And one of the things that she said to me, she said, oh Lord, I got it all the way up there. I'll fix it. She said to me, you are wounded. She said, you are a prophet of God and you are wounded. And I'm paraphrasing the conversation. She says, you're wounded. And she said, the reason why you're wounded is because your pastor did not take the time to get to know about prophets and get to know how to utilize them in your church. And so because of that, he dropped you. And I broke. Because I thought that I was by myself in this and that I was crazy. I was like, is it me, Lord? Is it me? Show me if it's me. Let me know. And the Lord was like, no, it's not you. You were dropped. It is what it is, because most pastors don't know what to do with prophets. Put them on the intercessory prayer team. Create a prophetic team, like bring somebody in to train them, to show them the ropes, to show them what needs to do. Create order in the church. Most prophets end up getting burned because pastors are utilizing their gifts. Hey, come prophesy. Hey, come pray. Hey, come do this. Hey, come do that. But when it's time to move, any slight thing that they do wrong, we're getting yelled at or fussed at or getting completely, I wouldn't say thrown out the church, but that's how it feels like. But you can't get mad if you never established order in the house for the prophets. That defeats the purpose. That's just like getting mad at a dog for peeing in the house or going to the bathroom in the house when you never trained them. You cannot get mad at a prophet moving because sometimes it's the prophet that just didn't know any better, or God is doing, or they feel like God is saying something in that moment, or God is saying something in that moment, and you're trying to figure out, like, wait, what's going on? What are you doing? And you haven't established order. You haven't established any type of open communication of what this looks like. You have to establish order in your church because, again, guess what? Prophets end up going uncovered and end up getting hurt because order was never established in the house in the first place. You can't do that. You have to establish order in the house in order for prophets to move around freely, but still be able to move around with some sort of order under order, because you can still be free and have order. It's really that simple. Establish order in your house so that way prophets don't end up getting hurt. Another big issue also, because I understand as a pastor, you can't learn every single member in your house, church. Like, it's virtually impossible. If you can do it, you must have a great mind. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, great mind. And I'm not saying that you have to get to know every single prophet. Like, I would think that would actually be wise for you to do that, but just hear me out. I remember my pastor at the time spoke out in front of the entire church and said, prophets are strange. Turned around, looked at me and called out my name. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, I thought I was normal. Like, it really messed with me. And I remember going through deliverance a year later, and that woman said to me, you are not strange, prophet of God. You are not strange. And y'all, I started manifesting something serious. Prophets are not strange, nor are they weird. You have not gotten to know your prophets or understand the call of the prophets. And what you don't understand, you're actually cursing and speaking against, causing more issues in your church. Now you have other people looking at the prophet like they're crazy, but yet you're utilizing their gifts because you want to know what the Lord is saying. You're going to have to pick a struggle. You cannot call them weird. You cannot call them strange. You cannot sit there and look at them sideways because you don't understand them. Prophet, if you are watching this and this is you, you are not weird. You are not strange. You are peculiar. You do something different. God has set you aside for a reason. You're not going to move the same way a pastor moves. Now, it's good for you to study what a pastor is so that you can get an understanding of how they operate. So that way you guys won't continuously come together bumping heads, but you're not strange. Pastors, your prophets in that house are not strange. They're not going to do things how you do things, but do your research. So that way you can get an understanding of how they move, or at least because everybody's character, every prophet even does things differently, but understand what a prophet is and what a prophet does. So that way, even though it may be a little strange on how they do things, it's like, oh, that's weird. Like, you still have an understanding, but I see what they're trying to do. Like, this is the point. This is what they're trying to do. It makes sense. They may do things differently, but that doesn't call them strange. That does not mean that they're strange. Be careful with your words. Be careful with how you speak about them. Because just as God says, touch not my anointed, but also do my prophets no harm. Be careful with how you speak to your prophets. And so the last reason number 3, why most prophets don't like pastors is because most pastors go through like this power trip or whatever. And I don't know what that's about, but I can guarantee you, pastors, most of your prophets don't even want to be there in the first place. God sent them there to help you, and they've been patiently waiting for the Lord to release them from that house. I don't know what that is, but it's like this. It comes off as a power trip because in most cases, not all, because again, this is not all pastors. In most cases, again, God sends the prophet to the house to help bring forth order, to help establish order, to help establish the church, to help bring forth correction and to tear down some things and to rebuild. We got that. And because most pastors don't know how to deal with their prophets, again, prophets speak, like even the ones that are a little bit timid, most prophets speak the first thing that comes to mind. Like it's a given. Most, I'm not saying it's all of them, but most of them speak the first thing that comes to mind. And we were born like that and we were wired like that. So when it's time for us to speak, I remember reading the book of Jeremiah. It's in Jeremiah chapter 1. God told Jeremiah, if you do not say what I tell you to say, I'm going to make you look foolish in front of them. I'm going to explain exactly what that means. So God gives you a like it's a hard word that God gives you to speak to whoever, right? And you're afraid to give the word because it's hard. It's harsh. Like, God, why you got me giving this hard word? And you try to dress it up. When God said, no, I need you to say exactly what I told you to say. And you try to dress it up. And what happens is because you try to dress it up, it comes out as confusion. So now, instead of you just saying what God had to say and he just have to deal with their feelings on the side, now you've confused the congregation or you've confused said person so much so to where you even start to become confused yourself. God said what he said, right? Most people don't like that. We're not even just getting into pastors. Most people don't like that, right? And what happens is it almost, and I think also this speaks to the identity of each person, because I want to be clear about something. Like, and even when it comes down to the conversation of the power grab, let me tell you something. There are some prophets that be playing and be going toe to toe with some of these pastors. So I'm not just speaking like, I understand you got some prophets that just be acting up. I'm well aware of that, or they are immature and they need God to deal with them. But if you got the prophets that don't care nothing about no power grab, they just waiting for the Lord to release them so they can go to their next assignment. What ends up happening is most pastors that don't know their identity in Christ, they feel some type of way. It almost comes off like, well, dang, like the church loved me, but now they love you, and I don't like that. Who cares? Like nobody cares about any of those things. You sound like you care about that, but I'm telling you, nobody cares. But guess what ends up happening to the prophet? They end up being uncovered and they end up being vulnerable and open. And most pastors, not all, who don't know how to handle prophets in general and who are petty and narcissists in general, they end up treating and doing that prophet badly. And that's why most prophets leave the church. Most prophets end up leaving the church before it was time for them to leave. It wasn't time for you to go. You left. Because in your mind, I'm not about to go sit back under that. And it's understandable, but if God did not release you to leave yet, you need to go back. So you're probably wondering, like, why am I talking about this? Because y'all, number one, we got to heal. And I have to share this breakthrough moment. Y'all. Like, I'm going to tell my story. Like I said, I was trying to tell my story before, but my phone was acting up completely. I have to share this breakthrough moment with you guys. So one thing that I've learned over time is that if you're not ready to tell your testimony, like meaning by way of you haven't started any type of healing, it's probably best that you shouldn't, because you telling your story is going to come off as gossipy. And if you're not careful, you're going to end up dishonoring that leader even more. And God is not going to be pleased, and you're going to have to walk through that process all over again. Nobody wants to go through all of that. Now, even in the midst of your healing, I'm not telling you not to tell your story. That does not mean not to tell your story. Still tell your testimony, but again, heal. Y'all, I never thought that I was going to be able to be set free from unforgiveness from my old leader, because I essentially ended up going to counseling, and I was talking to a friend who is a counselor, just kind of, sharing with her my story. And one of the things that she says, Michael, we teach as counselors, we teach and we basically say, like, you have to be honest with what you've walked through and be honest with everything. Don't try to sugarcoat it because your mommy and your daddy said it wasn't a good thing for you to say, I hate such and such. No, if that's what you're feeling, let's say it. And so that way we can talk it out too, so that way you can heal. Y'all, it got to the point where I was like, yo, my pastor ruined my life. Like, I literally said that out my mouth because I didn't want to give that much. I didn't want to give that much power, but it is what it is. Like, I had struggled after I left that church. And I remember having a dream, and in the dream, my old pastor was in my dream. And I remember in the dream thinking to myself, like, yeah, don't come over here and say nothing to me. And I remember that I woke up and I asked the Lord, I said, God, why did you give me this dream? And he said, because you still have residue of unforgiveness. Now, to be clear, like, I had been going through a healing process, but obviously I wasn't all the way there. And so I said, okay, God, so what do I do? So I prayed, and y'all, in that moment, after dealing with the spiritual abuse for probably 7 years, 6 or 7 years, and dealing with the church hurt for about 5 years, something finally broke. Something broke. And for the first moment and for the first time ever, I had compassion over my old leader. And I felt the love of God in my heart for that old leader. I never thought that I was ever going to get to that place. I never thought, like, I knew I would have to do like a lot of healing. There still may be some things that I still may have to, like, Lord, my bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I never thought that I would get to that place. And so, prophet to prophet, before you call yourself an apostle, before you call yourself a pastor, before you call yourself trying to build this mega ministry, if you are not healed, then you're no good to anybody else. You're no good to anybody else. And it's always good to heal, because usually another reason why God places you under that particular leader is because God wants to show you what not to do when you start your ministry or when you start doing things. And if you're not healed, whatever you judged, you are going to end up becoming just like. You're going to end up making the same mistakes. You're going to end up doing the same things and causing the same pain that you're hurting from, that you have never healed from. So you have to take the time to heal. It's necessary. And it's not just for you, it's for the people that God has called you to be over. So for the ones that may say, like, because listen, that spiritual abuse, now we're not even talking about the church hurt. That spiritual abuse is nothing to play with. Like, that's what you call going to therapy, not just counseling. You got to seek therapy dealing with that. And so for the ones that may felt like, I don't think I'll ever get set free from any of this, because church hurt is definitely a conversation that a lot of people and a lot of pastors specifically end up ignoring, or they dismiss it, saying things like, there's no such thing. We got to go through stuff all the time. Don't dismiss somebody else's pain because you accepted the call. Like, you can't do that. And usually most people that are dealing with church hurt is because you're the one that is causing the pain as well. So let's be clear. Like, I know pastors go through a lot. Again, I get that. But if you're a pastor, go tell your story. I'm talking about the prophets. But I understand that pastors go through a lot. But that's not cool, nor is that fair for you to dismiss somebody else's pain just because you have a different definition of what that really is. Church hurt is real. Jealous leaders are real. Leaders that operate as narcissists are real. Leaders that sleep around the entire church is real. Leaders that open up doors, leaders that do all types of things. It's a real thing. And here's the thing. You may not be the one to have caused the church hurt. Maybe you're the one that dismissed the prophet or dismissed the Holy Spirit's promptings or the warnings of the spirit of Jezebel in your church. And this is exactly why majority people in your church keep getting hurt in some sort, fame, or fashion. Please, like, stop dismissing this. You wouldn't want anybody else to dismiss your pain or you dismiss your experiences. Don't dismiss somebody else's. We know that you go through a lot and nobody's negating that. But everybody gets hurt in some sort of fashion, and church hurt is a real conversation. And so for those, and I'm speaking to the prophets, and even if you're not a prophet, maybe you're a prophetic voice, I don't know, and you've battled with trying to figure out if you would ever, let me speak specifically to the prophets. You didn't think that you would ever get healed from what happened to you. Like, you didn't think that it was ever possible. Y'all, I thought the same thing, legit. I thought the same thing, and the Lord was like, not so. There's healing on the other side of this. And for those that have been struggling, like you don't feel like you've gotten any further in your healing process, hear me when I say it's a process. Legit, it's a process. Like, every time God brought my old pastor up to me to walk through some sort of forgiveness, I said, dang, again, Lord? And the Lord had to remind me, remember that thought that you had earlier this week? Oh, yeah, you're right, Lord, my bad. I forgive. Like, it's a process. And please hear me. If you made the decision, because y'all, I made the decision years ago. I told myself that I was going to heal. I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know how that was going to go, but I made the decision that I was going to heal. I made that decision, y'all. Like I said to myself, I was going to take that time and I was going to heal. I made that my goal. It took a while. It took a minute because there were moments that I didn't think I was going to make it. But to get to this point, to be able to share this testimonial and say, like, y'all, God really did like do his big one and broke that thing off of me. It's a feeling that I never thought that I would ever, it was a place that I never thought that I would ever be able to get to, but it's possible. You can get there too. Prophet, there is healing for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.